You know, when we hear the word empathy, we usually picture this one single thing, this kind of warm, fuzzy feeling of connecting with someone. But what if I told you that empathy is way more complex than that? That it's actually a powerful tool with three totally distinct faces? Let's dive in and unpack what empathy really is. So, let me ask you this right off the bat. Is there a real difference between feeling for someone and feeling with them? Between understanding their pain and actually feeling that pain yourself? As we're about to find out, that little distinction, well, it's not just important, it's everything. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by totally redefining empathy. Then we'll break down its three different faces. We'll even look at the science of where it comes from, explore its potential dark side, and finally, get into why mastering this stuff matters so much right now. Okay, so what is empathy, really? The way we usually talk about it just scratches the surface. It's not one thing, but a whole set of processes that work together. See, real empathy is actually this awesome blend of cognition, emotion, and action. It's about understanding someone's world, sharing in their feelings, and then actually being moved to do something about it. Thinking, feeling, and doing, these are the three building blocks. And that brings us to the core of this whole thing, the three distinct types or faces of empathy. Each one plays a totally unique role, and, getting the difference between them is the absolute key to unlocking this skill. First up, we've got cognitive empathy. I like to call this one the thinker. This is a purely intellectual skill. It's about taking someone else's perspective, literally putting yourself in their shoes to get why they see things the way they do. You don't have to feel their sadness or their joy, you just have to understand it. Next up is emotional empathy, or the feeler. Now, this one isn't about thinking at all. It's about feeling with somebody. It's that moment when your friend is upset and you suddenly feel that same knot in your stomach. Their feelings are literally contagious, which is why scientists sometimes call it affective empathy. And that brings us to our third phase, compassionate empathy, the doer. This is where thinking and feeling come together to spark action. You understand their perspective, you feel their pain, and that potent combination creates what's called empathic concern, this genuine drive to actually help. This is empathy in motion. This chart here really lays it out nice and simple. Cognitive is basically saying, I get it. Emotional is, I feel it with you. And compassionate is, I want to help. They're each a different step, and they're most powerful when they all work together. So, where does this all come from? So is empathy something we learn, or are we just born with it? Well, the answer, like it often is kind of both. Our ability to connect with each other is wired deep into our biology and our evolution. Yet our empathy has some pretty deep roots. Genetically, get this, research from 23andMe actually pinpointed specific gene variants linked to how empathetic we are. Evolutionarily, a lot of scientists think it grew out of that primal instinct to care for our own kids. And in our brains, specific networks light up like a Christmas tree when we think about others. And socially, studies consistently find that, on average, women tend to be a bit more attuned to nonverbal emotional cues than men. But here's where things get complicated. Empathy isn't always a force for good. In fact, when these three types get out of balance, they can lead to some seriously negative outcomes. This quote from Dan Batson just perfectly captures the dark side of having only cognitive empathy. If you can understand how someone thinks and feels, but you don't have that compassionate piece, well, empathy can become a weapon. This is the empathy of a con artist or a ruthless negotiator. It's actually a key trait in what psychologists call the dark triad personalities. You can anticipate their moves, exploit their weaknesses, and, win. So it all comes down to balance. On one side, you have cognitive empathy without compassion. That can lead to cold, calculated manipulation. On the other hand, you have emotional empathy without any boundaries, and that can just lead to total burnouts. When you just absorb everyone else's pain without any distance, you get overwhelmed. It's a condition called compassion fatigue, and it's a huge risk for people in caring professions. Okay, so now that we get the mechanics and the risks, let's talk about why getting empathy right is so critical. And not just for our friendships, but for our society, our workplaces, everything. Just look at this data from a recent workplace study. While a whopping 82% of employees feel their direct manager is empathetic, that number drops a full 20 points when they're asked about their CEO. That empathy deficit at the top creates this massive disconnect, and it has real tangible costs. In fact, that empathy gap contributes to an estimated $180 billion in lost productivity every single year in the US alone. This isn't just some soft skill. It has a hard, measurable impact on the bottom line. But when we get it right, the benefits are enormous. Balanced, compassionate empathy is literally the engine for good stuff in the world. It drives us to cooperate, it strengthens our moral compass, it helps kids stand up to bullies, it builds trust, and yeah, it creates way healthier and more productive places to work. So the biggest takeaway here is this. Empathy isn't a passive feeling. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's an active practice that requires the intellectual work of understanding, the emotional courage to feel, and the moral drive to actually do something. And that leaves us with this final thought. Empathy isn't something you either have or you don't. It's a skill that can be developed, a muscle that you can strengthen. So the real question isn't whether you have it. The real question is, how are you going to practice it?